Okay, so new week, new lab, and that new lab is the same lab, just on a different operating system. So DNS server on Ubuntu 18. This is really where the differences are going to come in. I don't know if you're on Ubuntu 20. If you did get on 20 and then didn't change back to 18, here's where the differences may actually come into play a little bit. But it should probably stay mostly the same. So this lab is it's going to be a tough one. Not because it's hard to understand or anything like that, but because there's so much text editing in this lab that the odds of making a typo are pretty high. So the thing that you really want to do in this lab is check, and double check, and triple check, and quadruple check all the things that you're typing. If you do not, you're going to end up in a situation where it's not working and it throws out a line number at you under the log, under system control or journal control. And yeah, it's just going to point you like, hey, line 40. I expected this. I got this. I don't know what's going on. So yeah, it's going to be extremely important that you can run journal control and all of that kind of fun stuff. So let me get in here real quick. And just so you remember, or so you know, journal control. So if you run it just like that, journal control -xe, it drops you down. Obviously, I just booted this box, as you can see. Just startup. But as we go on through, this command is going to come in really handy. Journal control -xe. So X stands for extra, as in give me all the extra information about whatever it is you're telling me. And then E stands for the end. So put me at the end of the log. So this will put you at the most recent stuff. So if you just started out or just started a service, the E is going to help a lot because it will take you straight down to, so you do something like system control start bind 9. And then you run immediately journal control -E. It'll take you to the end, and you'll most likely see what happened with bind. Did it start up right? Did it start up wrong? Were there errors? If there were errors, what were they? All that. So this is a command that you want to keep in your back pocket all the time. It will help you so much. All right. So here is the deal. We need to install some packages, obviously. And you need to have internet to do that. So before you start doing stuff, double check what your IP address is. Try to ping the internet. All right, looks like I'm getting Google from the IP address. Let's make sure that I'm getting Google via DNS. Now that's something that we're going to have to change here in just a minute. Uh-oh. Name failure. So something's going on here. But oh yeah, that's surely gonna break stuff. So I guess I probably should have checked internet before I started. Let me see what's going on here. See, I knew I should have. Well, let's see. Net plan 50 cloud. That's working. I was going to say, I knew I should have started up my Linux Mint box so that I could check on this stuff immediately. Well, already. Troubleshooting. Oh, I must have been running it live. But this is the exact kind of thing that I'm expecting pretty much everybody to run into at one time or another. The whole point of running the entire lab for yourself is that you run into these things. You run into issues where routing isn't working or DNS isn't working or anything. Something's going to break. I promise you that. And you're going to have to troubleshoot and figure out what's going on with it. So I don't think I've turned DNS off. So I'm kind of curious as to what's going on here. And it does have the correct information here. I've got the right IP, I've got the right gateway, and I've got DNS. There's really not much else I need to give it for it to actually work correctly. And same with Mint. Looks like it's not getting. Does have an IP. Pretty sure that's from the Ubuntu server. 16.1, nope, not 100, 200.1. See if I can't make this a little bit bigger. All right. So DNS resolver. Oh. Well, that makes sense. Did I do forwarder? Oh. Well, DNS isn't working because DNS is off. So that would that would absolutely be the reason. Oh, you know what? I think I did that because of Windows. So one of the things that that you did in the previous lab, which may affect this lab, is if you turned off DNS to allow Windows to work. At least if you want Linux to work temporarily, but not the Windows interface to work, you'll want to come down here in the configuration, say, all right, DNS can run, but only for the Linux interface. Let me see if that's going to do it for us. Oh, I wonder which one it's talking about. Oh, you know what? It may be talking about that one. Let me see if that was it. No, sure enough. It's going to make me do all. Well, we're only going to need it for a little bit anyway. So leave that there. Turn that guy back on. There we go. Let's see if that picked us up. Yay! Okay. All right. So again, troubleshooting. You're going to have to do it over and over and over again in your career. So why not start now? All right. So now that we have internet, we can run our apt update, get the new list of packages, and of course, move on to install the software we need. All right. Sudo apt install. Here's the deal. You want all of the little bind goodies. So sudo apt install bind 9. Bind 9 util, not untils, utils. Bind 9 docs. Okay. Oh no. I wonder if oh, there's no page up on this thing. Well, all right. How about pipe it to less? Bind. Oh, doc. Did they change that? Huh. All right. Well, bind 9 doc. Let me fix that here. They had to have changed it because there's no way. I know I would have gotten complaints about that. All right. Anyway, so same command. Just bind 9 doc. There we go. So you can see at this line right here, The following new packages will be installed: bind9, bind9doc, and bind9utils, and then Python 3 as a dependency. And that's fine. Let it download and install all that. So while we're waiting on that, if you don't have it open already, this is the information that you're going to need to be able to install, to be able to get some examples of what's going on underneath the hood for bind9. It's going to cover some of the basics as well. I mean, if you need a refresher on what DNS records are, they're going to give you a basic idea of what's going on. But, I mean, a lot of this information is going to just be coming straight from your Network Directory Services class. You guys talked about DNS there. And, of course, the last lab. You know what an A record is, a pointer record at this point, because you've already done it in Windows. And we're just going to do the same exact thing here. But we're creating a primary master server only. The idea here is that there's only going to be one DNS server, just like we have in on the Windows side. Secondary master would be if we were to create a secondary DNS server that we want to use maybe as failover or something like that, or just kind of in a round robin type situation where we ask one, we ask the other, we ask one, we ask the other. And this is mostly just to distribute some of that load, so you don't have one server just answering all the questions. But again, we don't have that, so we're not worried too much about it. I'm more worried about whether or not you can figure out how DNS works than how you can add a second one. Anyhow, we won't need to worry about hybrid and stealth. So DNS record types, obviously you can have a bunch of different types. We're going to deal with A, and they're going to look like that. And they don't have a pointer in here. But PTR is the same exact thing, but backwards. I'll show you. There are examples of it a little further down. So anyhow, we're going to need to configure our forwarders. The way we're going to do that, it's going to look like that. But these are all the files that we're going to need to deal with. All right, so the rest of it, we'll come to it as we get to it. But notice, configure named.conf.options. So we need to decide on these three things. So let's go look at that file real quick. Let's see. No. Bind. Yep. named.conf.options. So let's look inside of that. So that's what that file looks like. Starts here, ends here. So notice the way that it ends. That bracket and a semicolon. And it opens with the word options and then an open bracket. So you can't just go to the bottom of this file and add stuff after the bracket. It's not going to work. Everything that you add or everything that you change has to be within these brackets. The other thing is that while we are in Linux familiar with the way that comments are made, bind is different. So let me explain why it's different, though. Bind is not and was never a Linux software. It just runs well on Linux. So it's coming from the Berkeley guys, the same guys that create BSD, the same guys that are really underneath all of the Mac software. So if you're running a Mac, you're running a version of BSD. And while they are like Unix, and so is Linux, right? They are not the same. BSD and Linux are not the same. They have different ways of dealing with things. They have different ways of, obviously, dealing with comments, right? So that's just something that we're going to have to remember. But it's not too terribly bad. If you look, I mean, it is kind of obvious. You have a big old paragraph of explanation right here, preceded by 2 forward slashes, right? In a configuration file, you don't just get to tell the configuration file in English, in full complete sentences, what you want it to do. You're going to have to deal with something like, options up at the top. Forwarders. here's really what I'm getting after. I'm getting at. If we take forwarders and then back it up to where that line does not have those 2 forward slashes, that's what we're going to want. Oops, too far. And then there we go. There. Okay, yeah, you do not want that red there. Nano actually puts that red there to tell you that, hey, it's not like right on the 8 spaces or 4 spaces or whatever bind likes. I think it's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, 8. So be careful. When you see red, you probably want to make a change. I don't think that bind cares too much. Like if you have 7 spaces, but it's still got, it's still a number or an IP address with a semicolon at the end, I think it'll still let you get by. But it's not 100% correct. It's 99% correct. You can get away with it. But either way, no worries. The idea here, though, is that you want forwarders just like you do in Windows. And I think in Windows, I had 1111. Oops, leave that semicolon there. And 1001. I think it doesn't matter. So long as the DNS servers that you're pointing to are alive, it'll work. So Google's is fine. Cloud9, or not Cloud9, what is it? Cloudflare. Cloudflare is right, or can be used in OpenDNS. There's a bunch of them. All right. So anyway, so we got our forwarders. We need to set up allow transfer. This one here. And you should be able to find this one. Let's see if I can find it. There it is. Allow transfer. Should be. That's saying to put it in zones. Pretty sure it goes in this file. So let's add that in. So allow transfer. You don't necessarily have to have it on a new line, so long as it is there. Oops. And typing it out is a whole lot harder. Just simply because I have my finger is busted. All right. And then whatever my IP address was, I think this 200.2. Pretty sure that's what it is. All right. So let's find out if I broke absolutely everything. So I saved that file. You've got forwarders there, allow transfer, and listen on, all right there. And now it's time to go take a look and see if I totally blew everything up, which is quite possible. Let me see, system CTL, restart by 9. Okay. Okay, so here's what I'm looking at. I did not make it mad. So after I restarted it, it will either give you errors immediately or just write the errors straight to the log. So one of the other things that I can do, as I was showing you before, is... Oh, if I'd spell it right, Journal. There we go. And it's because I don't have any zones that all that craziness comes out. I haven't done that yet. But you can see right there, starting by 9. And as you go on down, you can see that it's looking through the configurations, setting stuff up, looking for zones that don't exist yet. But at this point, you should be able to start using your own DNS to get you out to the internet. Because the forwarders are configured, that is really the biggest thing that we want to be dealing with, or that we want to have, because that's how you're going to get internet. Except for the internal resolution for your own names, that's the biggest thing that you want to have configured out. So that's where we start. That's where we're dealing with that. All right. So now, configure the forward lookup, and then we'll do the reverse lookup as well. So here's what we're going to be doing here. So if you go into etc bind, you'll see a few different files. First of which is the DB stuff. So DB0, DB127, DB255. What you want with this is, if you look into those files, you'll see some examples. So looking at DB0, and most of this is going to be very, very similar. So looking at 127, there's pretty much no difference whatsoever. Outside of, if you look at that very last line in 127, that is a DNS record, a pointer record. And then DB local. So the 127 is important because that is an example of a reverse lookup zone. DB.local is important because it is an example of a forward lookup zone. So in both of those files, what you're looking at the very bottom is if this server, or well, yeah, all those records are really pointing at this one server, at the server that you're on right now. Notice in DB127, it says 1.0.0 in PTR localhost. And then at the very bottom, the db.local, you see at in like A 127.0.0.1. That is how you're pointing to yourself. We will go and configure the DB127 file, because that IP address is not our IP address. And actually, if you look at it, that's not really even an IP address at all. And I'll explain that here in just a minute. So let's work on db.local. So I've got it in here. Just so you guys can keep it straight, let's create a directory. etc bind zones. So if you LSL again, right, you'll notice there is no zones. So you need to make it. Call it zones. And then you want to copy db.local. Do not move it. It's a good idea to keep that in etc bind, just so you have that reference, and just so if you totally blow up the file that you're editing, you can always have a place to start over. So don't edit or move those files. You just want to copy them. So sudo cp db.local. So that's the file I want to copy. And then I want to copy it into zones. And then I want to name it. Let me see. I could have sworn I had how I wanted you to name it. No, it doesn't really matter. So you can call it db.forward or something like that, or db.fwd, since I only have one zone, one forward lookup zone in this particular area. If we were trying to encompass the Windows domain names and IP addresses and all that stuff, I would do forward.lin and then create a forward.win. That way you can have them separate. But you don't actually need to do that. You can put them all in one zone. Anyway, so copy that. Let's go into zones and double check on it. Sure enough, there it is, cat db.forward. And you can see, same file, right? Nothing special. So let's start editing it. And you want to do this not necessarily little by little, But after you're done editing this file, don't move on to the reverse lookup zone until you know that this one's working. Dealing with two separate zones that are broken really makes it a whole lot harder, because what you're dealing with is a string of errors that already make you go cross-eyed. So the more you can whittle that down and work on it piece by piece, the easier it's going to be for you. So here's the deal. What you want in this area, if you can see my little blinky cursor under localhost, is you want to change this to your domain name. The whole domain name that we're working off of, the whole thing, lin.lchavez.io dot. There is a dot at the end of that. So this is actually a statement. You're saying that the start of authority is this particular domain name, so that is the domain that this particular DNS server is responsible for. So it's important that you have that in the SOA line. Now, root here is actually just supposed to be an email address. There is no @ symbol. I do know that. That is, I mean, I guess it's by design, but that's the idea. There you can't have, well, step back a sec. @ symbols have a meaning in these zone files. So we can't just throw in @ symbols to make a email address or something like that. So instead, what happens is, in the second column after the start of authority, it knows it's an email address, and the dot closest to the left-hand side will be converted to an @ if it is required. So root at lin.chavez.io doesn't actually exist, but it doesn't matter. The whole idea here is that it expects an email address, so give it an email address. All right. So this serial line, this is the only line that you're really going to have to start dealing with after you get your configuration file all set up. What this means is how many iterations this file has been through. Basically, this is used if you ever want your DNS server to update other DNS servers about what it's dealing with. So essentially, this is how Bind9 knows that you've made changes that you want to propagate. Now, it's not hugely important for us because we're only running one DNS server. But if you were to run two DNS servers and you never changed this serial line, your secondary DNS server would never get the updates. So it's important to get into the good habit of every time you add a record or every time you update a record, you want this serial number to increment by 1. Right? So this is essentially version 2. And then so I'm going to keep it that way initially. But if we had a secondary server, I'd go ahead and increment it. So increment it or not, at least at the very beginning, it doesn't necessarily matter. Because what you're going to do if you set up a secondary DNS server is actually run a zone transfer. So you would actually ask this server, hey, give me all your DNS. And then after that, the serial number will handle it after that. So change it or not, doesn't really matter. Not at this point. But after you start making changes, you do want to update that. Okay. So we're actually not going to configure IPv4. So you don't have to have this particular line right here, very bottom one. You don't need it. So you can get rid of it. But we do want to make a couple changes. So here we want to change this to the actual name. I'm going to guess that's what I have it at. I think that's what I have it at. We'll find out here in just a minute, and I'll come back in and change it if I need to. So what is it saying? These last two lines, what is this saying? At means this machine. So this machine has a name server record. Name server, this is not an A record, but it's important to have this, of that. So let's compare that to what they've got over here. I know they have it. There it is. Yeah, So right here, we're just emulating this line. NS in that example is the name of the server. It's not it doesn't have some special meaning or something like that. So what you want is whatever the name of your server is, put that there. Oops, that's actually the reverse. Here we go. Oh, and actually they've got the fully qualified domain name there, so let's make sure we have that. And there we go. And the A record. Oh, actually, they don't have the 127.0.0.1 record. That's for itself. You can leave that there. You can delete it. It actually doesn't matter. So then what you want is to start creating the records for each of the devices that you have. So Ubu server. And then you can just do tab here in A, and then what you want it to translate to. 16, 200, oop, not 1, 2. And it doesn't matter the order that you put these records in, but I'm a little weird if I want them to be in numerical order. I think it's my router. And this is okay. Notice, my N got shoved over. That's okay. A, and then 172.16.200.1. Reason being, the next character over would have been the I, and they can't be shoved together, so it just created a whole new column. That is okay. Don't let that freak you out. And the other thing was going to be the Linux Mint server. Again, not for a grade. You don't need to have this, but for completeness sake and just to show you another example of it. What did I name it? Oh, you know what? That's live, but I'll just use the name anyway. Mint A 172.16.200.100. Okay. So this should work. Should. All right, so I wrote all those changes. It's really all you need to change. It's the start of authority lines, and then make sure your records actually have meaning to them. And look at every record. You gotta know what each of those records actually means. The most important one is this one, because it defines who the DNS server is and what its name is. And then these three below. This one was in by default. You don't have to have it. And these next three are the ones that I created myself, right? Name, in, a, IP address. That is the way that is going to work. So we're going to look at this line now. I'm skipping 4. Totally know that. So we're going to look at named.conf.local real quick. This way, what the whole reason I'm doing this is so I can test it. Actually, I might be able to test it now. Oh, no, it's the other way around. Restart by 9. Okay, I didn't blow anything up yet. Yet. I am fully expecting this to blow up. Mostly because it's hard to type for me right now, and that just means more chance for typos. But let's look in named.conf real quick, .local. Okay. So, here's the deal. Let me see if I can find the examples here. Oh, yeah, okay, cool. Okay, there it goes. All right, so here's what we need to do. Looking at these examples here. you define a zone by literally saying the word zone. And then in parentheses, or in quotes, you give your actual domain name. So lin.lchavez.io. Add that bracket. And then tab here, type is master. As we were talking about before, primary master, right? This is how you actually define that. And then file. This is really important. You cannot typo this. You are pointing directly to the file that you created in the zones directory. So db.fwd. That has to be exactly correct. And then close out your bracket, and that should do it. So if something's going to break, and it's very likely to break right now. Yeah, okay. So it does have a couple of things for me to look at. Let me check one thing. Yeah, it is ubiserve. Okay, so let's look at that file then. Oh, well, before we do that, actually, sudo system journal. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Journal CTL. There we go. So this way we can actually. So ubuserve.lin.lchavez.io. So it's complaining. Let me check something real quick. See what that says. So it might be complaining about that. It's got to be complaining about that NS line. Oh. I think I know what it is. See, speaking of typos, I don't have that dot at the end of it. And so it's making assumptions. Let me see if that's going to fix it. Oh, no, what are you doing? Quit that. There we go. And I want to be real careful about introducing more typos. I almost did. Okay. There we go. Okay, yep, didn't like that. It didn't like my dot not being there. So again, but you can see that entire file would not have been read. It would have just been ignored. So all of those records, all the work that you put into it, would not have mattered a single bit, all because I forgot to put a period at the very end of it. So it is extremely important to make sure that you're doing this bit by bit, number one, but number two, that as you run into issues, you solve those issues as they come. If you just go create both your zone files and then go create the named.conf.local changes and the named.conf.option changes and all that stuff all at the same time, without checking it little by little, you're going to end up with about 10 errors at the end of it, and you're not going to know where to start. That is that is the biggest thing that kills people on this lab. So to be honest with you, this is probably the hardest lab in the entire semester. Not because it's hard to understand or anything like that, but because of exactly what just happened to me. One period threw the whole thing off. Once I fixed it, everything is okay. All zones loaded. That's the line that you're looking for right here. If you created zones and then you linked your zones and then it comes back and tells you all zones loaded, you're doing okay. You're doing okay. There might still be some issues that come up, like typoing your host names, things like that. But as far as bind 9 is concerned, it looks right. The other errors are really just, us misspelling stuff. Okay, so now let's work on the other half, which is number 4, and then we'll do number 5 again. All right. So how did we do that before? First thing we did, let's move back. Here is our db.127. That's the one that we're going to steal. So we're going to copy that, db127, move that into zones, and call it db.reverse. I'm a simple man. You will realize this. If you ever see me name files, take my server name, for example, ubu srv, right? Oops. Rerun that as sudo. Go into zones. Take a look. There's our reverse. So sudo nano db.reverse. Looks almost identical, but there's a couple things that we need to really pay attention to. But this is the same thing. Lin dot. Make sure that dot is at the end. Again, dot at the end. And just to be sure, I'm going to come over here and check. So that's the A record. Here are PTR. So yeah, exactly. This is why I wanted to check. There's no way for any one human, and maybe I'm saying this because I just don't remember them, but there's no way for one human to remember exactly how this stuff is set together. Most of the time that you're dealing with DNS, you're just coming in and updating it and not writing the whole thing like we're doing right here. But it's good to know how to write the whole thing just in case you ever run into it. But take a look at that line that I've got highlighted on the left, and instead of having its fully qualified domain name like we did earlier, it just wants the name. Make sure that dot is at the end. Now this line is going to go all the way. Well, it's not going to go away. I'm just going to repurpose it. So here's the deal with this. Because it's a /24, our network, think of our network and our network ID and all of that stuff. Because it's a /24, we're going to define that in this file. We're going to tell it what the actual network ID is there. So here, because it knows the network ID, it knows, for me, it's 172.16.200. It knows that part. All I need to do is add the last octet here. So actually, I shouldn't even mess with that. That's 1. And this is going to be my router.lin.lchavez.io. I do the fully qualified domain name because as in the example, that's what it has. And then next up, 2 in PTR, and then blah, 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 all of that. And then if I remember correctly, it's 100, and it was mint.lin.lchavez.io. Okay. So that should do it for that. I'll make my serial the same as the other file. That way they're the same, exactly the same. So if I increment one, well, I guess you don't necessarily have to, because you would, if you're adding records or something like that, you will definitely increment it. But I can definitely see a situation where one would be one and one would be the other. Like the forward lookup zone is like serial number 5, where the reverse lookup zone is serial 3 or something like that. If you only update one file, you only update one serial. Okay, so Now we got to go into the local, named.conf.local. See what I mean? There's my busted finger. Okay, and now we got to define our other zone. So here's the bit that I always have to check. I'm just writing this out because I'll forget it otherwise. Okay, so let's look at the example. No, that's the A. Yeah, here it is. This actually makes a big difference. You need to type in backwards, and then after that put the in, at, or ARPA thing. You need to define your zone. A reverse lookup zone is a bit different than your forward. You don't just get to throw in the domain name and call it a day. You have to define the network that you're dealing with, but backwards. Turns out that all networks are dealt with backwards from the way that we read them. It runs from right to left. As we read left to right, it runs from right to left. So this is actually just the way that the computer would see it anyway. It's just forcing us to write it that way. And if you remember during the Windows installation, during your DNS configuration there, if you remember, it did show you this in, at, or ARPA line that you had to accept. And it was written exactly like this. So it's important to know that reverse lookup zones will always have your network ID, but backwards. And it will ignore the host portion of your network. All right, so in my case, it was 172.16.200.0 is my network ID. So chop off the 0 because that's the host part. And then just write it backwards. 200, 16, 172, right? So if we read that from right to left, it reads correctly. 172, 16, 200. But in reverse lookup zone, you have to write it backwards. in-adder.arpa. That defines our zone. We come out here, type is master. Come out here, and file is etc bind zones db.rev. And that should pretty much do it for us. Let me make sure in my notes I've got everything taken care of. So copy db local to zones, add your A records, copy that one to zones. So in here, I'm having you use the domain name and the network ID to name the files that go into that zones directory. So what I'm looking for, I really doubt I'm going to count off for it. Actually, I'll be explicit on that. I won't count off for it. But just to help you remember what's going on, it may be better to not use generic terms like FWD and REV. But since we only have one network, I'm not going to count off for it or anything like that. Okay, so then name.local, primary zone, set the server as master, point to the file. Cool, yep. Okay, so it looks like all I'm requiring here. Write that file, everything looks okay. Oop, no, stop. Typos, man. No. And because I don't feel very confident about that, look at it one more time. Still looks okay. Oh, wait, no. Ha! You catch that typo? Look at it. There's a typo there. Of course, I'm glad I looked at it again. There is no semicolon right here. That would have broken the file. Not saying that the file is not broken still, just I know that would have broken the file. Systemctl, restart, bind 9. Errors? No, hooray, no errors, great. So all zones loaded. And if you look, this first line, it actually references the zone file that I created, 216.172 in Adder ARPA, right? Loaded it. And that serial number, what I had, is there. And then if you look a couple lines down, actually third line down from there, right here, lin.lchavez.io, serial 2. Everything's going according to plan so far. So this should work. We should have the ability to start asking questions now. So ns lookup server 172. Oop, caps lock. Get out of here. 16.200.2. And let's just see. Oh, it's not liking it. So we'll take a look at that here in just a sec and make sure everything else is good. Oh, I know what it is. That's what it is. Okay, because I didn't finish the lab, so it's not going to work. Obviously, that's what it is. So that does work, right? Fully qualified domain name does come out with the IP address that I'm expecting. We can do that with all of them. Ooh. Hopefully. Oh, man. The up does not work. Mint.lin. Cool. So they all come back with answers, right? Ubiserve came back with 2. My router came back with 1. And Mint came back with 100. And that is all, should be correct. All right, let's double check. 200, 100, 200, 100. Sweet. All right, so everything is correct. Now, one of the cool things that you can do at this point is actually ping stuff. And this is assuming Ubuntu is accepting these. I think it is. Should be. Oh, okay. Yep. Let me fix everything. It's not using the correct DNS right now. And I can prove that to you. If you look here, primary DNS. Wrong one. That is the router, not Ubuntu. So let's go fix that, and then we should be able to ping everything. Okay. So in your Ubuntu server, we need to make one more change, just as we did in the Windows machine. We have to go into the dhcp.conf file to update what our domain name and what our domain name servers are going to be. So let's sudo nano. At this point, it doesn't really matter where you are. dhcp dhcpd.conf. Okay. So down. Find your, there it is, subnet range. So domain name servers, that's got to change to 2. And I like to have it above domain name servers. I don't know. That's more of a personal preference. It doesn't actually matter what order any of this goes in. All of the things will be processed regardless of order. But domain name, and I'm pretty sure this has to go into quotes. Give me a semicolon out there. All right. And don't forget, every single time you make a change to any particular service configuration file, you need to restart the service. Restart ISC. Okay. Let me make sure I didn't break anything. What I'm afraid of is it doesn't want those quotes, or it does want those quotes. Seems like everything's okay. Okay. All right, so at this point, what we really want to do is get Linux Mint to have the correct IP address information. So DNS will be different, and we'll have, we should have a domain name to work off of. So let's do that. One of the ways that you can do that is just disable networking. So click on the network thing, and then it says networking enabled or whatever. Just uncheck that box. And I would give it a couple seconds. And then enable it back. Then let's take a look at the connection information. There it is. Primary DNS is updated. I'm going to assume the domain name is updated as well, but we can check. NMCLI dev show. And there it is. IPv4 domain, lin.lchavez.io. Okay, so now back to my original suggestion, which was you can ping things. Now you should be able to ping things. So it's got the right DNS server. We should be able to ubu serve lin.lchavez.io. There we go. And that's if we use the fully qualified domain name, right? We should also be able to do this. So because, and it's the same way in Windows as well. So, because we have this is what I was looking for. Because we have that right there, anytime you do any kind of single name resolution, or really any name resolution at all, and it can't find it immediately, it will tack that on the end of it. lin.lchavez.io. So while I can just type in the whole fully qualified domain name, I want to be lazy. This is how I get to be lazy. You assign that in DHCP and then just deal with this bit, right? Only deal with that bit. Type that out, and it'll still work. Notice it's not pinging ubuserve, not by itself, right? I told it to, but look what it is pinging. Right there. It's pinging the fully qualified domain name. That's exactly what we want. But I only had to do a quarter of the work, right? That's important. Okay. So typos, that's going to break you. That's what's going to do it to you. But if you can get those typos done, look, I can kill the DNS resolver here now on pfSense. So let's get rid of that. And then with my last breath here, do the forwarders work? They do! Look at that. Ping Google. Let's ping something we hadn't pinged before. It may have actually been. There it goes. Anytime you make a DNS query, your computer actually caches that. So it holds on to it for a little while. That way it doesn't have to look it up every single time if you just keep going to the same website over and over and over again, or hitting the same name over and over and over again. It'll cache it. But in this case, it wasn't cached. It still worked. So that's how I know DNS is working. I can ping internal things by name. I can ping external things by name. Easy peasy. So, oh, by the way, you're going to need to do some NS lookups, right? So pfSense is fully qualified domain name, pfSense is host name, and then pfSense is IP address. You want to do all three. Oh, yeah, I didn't check the reverse, so we'll check that now. Fully qualified domain name. Let's do that. Does work, does come back with an answer. Then by itself, comes back with the same exact answer because, as I mentioned before, the domain name that we configured in DHCP to hand out, that is really just getting translated to the fully qualified. And now the moment of truth, there it is. So the whole reason you want to reverse, I don't think I mentioned this before, but the whole reason you want to reverse is if you know the IP address but you don't know its name and you want to find out its name, that's what a reverse lookup is meant for. Right? Think of it like you found a phone number on the street and you want to figure out who owns it. You can take that phone number to the phone book, look it up. It's a really hard thing to do, but I mean, the example works. You look it up and then you find out, that was Mike Jones, right? So you want an answer for every single one of these. And you want to do your router and your Ubuntu server. I would like you guys to go through and add in the third record of your Mint machine. But again, I'm not grading it, so you don't have to. But I'd like you to for extra practice. So anyway, go through all of those. pfSense and Ubuntu. Make sure you are able to NS lookup or dig or whatever. Does not matter. All of those things. And then the last little bit. Oh, what? No, that is a mistake. That should say Linux Mint, so I'll fix that here in just a sec. What I want, and pmsense is going to complain about this if you don't change the name first. So if you go to General Setup, swap that domain to Lin, just to make it match to the rest of your network. And now we should be able to, let's do HTTP, well, that doesn't actually matter. My router slash, ta-da. And who is it? Who is it? pfsense. And then you want the fully qualified as well, lin.lchavez.io. Same. And there you go. There it is. Your network is now set up for names. That is the big thing that I want you guys to be able to do in this particular lab. So that was a lot. That was absolutely a lot. And the biggest thing you got to watch out for is typos. That's the only thing that beat me up this time. If you were watching closely enough, you did notice that it was a whole period that just brought bind 9 down. That's it. That's all there is to it. So check, double check. If for some reason it's still not working and you are banging your head against the keyboard trying to make it work, but it's not working, send me your configuration files, or at least what Journal Control is complaining about, whatever file that is, and then I'll help you look over it. Sometimes it does take a second pair of eyes to figure out that, oh yeah, look, it's a semicolon. So that's what you should pay attention to. Keep that in mind. And that's how it works. All right, I'll kill it here.